Well, this morning we're putting a wrap on this series that we've been in, looking at the book of Ruth. We've been here for 4 weeks now, or this is week number 4, and I've really enjoyed going through this book together with you. I've talked to some other friends, pastor friends, and it's been the way that I planned this out to go through it in 4 weeks has been really fun. But there's just been so much kind of on my end of things of study work that I really had to say, like, okay, we're not trying to make a hostage situation here, so I can't share it all. But I've learned so much from the book of Ruth, and I've loved getting to share with you the parts that I've gotten to share with you. And so in chapter 1 of Ruth, what we kind of looked at was this family, Naomi and Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion, and really what was going on in their life. And then Ruth came onto the scene. And what we see is a life before Boaz, and really what we see is a problem that exists. Chapter 2 comes into play, and Boaz is introduced, and we begin to immediately see improvement in the lives of Ruth and Naomi. We begin to immediately see like the needs that they had are being met. The fears that they had are being squashed. Things are just looking better for them. And then Ruth chapter 3, where we were in last week, we were introduced to kind of some strange dating and courting processes, but we were also introduced to this idea that Ruth, by the end of it, was confident that Boaz was her redeemer, her kinsman redeemer. Boaz was the one that she was going to hopefully get to marry, is who she wanted to marry. And chapter 4 kind of wraps this book up with the main point of the whole book. The whole book, it's about one theme, and that is redemption. And so chapter 4 is where this kind of wraps up. And so Ruth chapter 4, starting in verse 1, says, "Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, 'Turn aside, friend, sit down right here.' And he turned aside and he sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, 'Sit down here.' So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, 'Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for know that there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you.' And he said, 'I will redeem it.' Then Boaz said, 'The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance.' Then the Redeemer said, 'I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it.'" So what we see at play here in these first 6 verses, there are several like cultural and historical things happening that to us don't make a lot of sense. But I've said this several times throughout this series. We are in 2025 AD. This was happening 1100 BC in a completely different part of the world. So some of the things going on that don't make sense to us but would have made sense to them they were just part of that world. But for us to kind of properly understand things, we got to flesh some of that out. So the first thing is just this gate. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of a gate, I think about the thing that my dad always made me get out of the truck to open the gate. My dad and grandpa always said the real cowboy rides in the middle so he doesn't have to get any gates. And somehow I never got to be the real cowboy. I always had to ride on the outside, and I never got to drive so that I could be the one to get the gate. But like, we don't think of the gate as anything besides just a barrier to keep something from one side of the fence to the other side of the fence, but to have the possibility to go into that other side. Well, for these people, the gate was a very different thing. This was not just an entry point into the city to keep bad people out and keep good people in, or however you want to view that. The gate of a city, this was the center of social life. This is where all the things were happening. You're talking about a time before technology existed. You're talking about a time before entertainment as we know it existed. You're talking about a time before really connection in the way that we connect existed. So people would gather at the city gate all the time. And this is just where they would go and hang out and spend time. It was where all the social life happened, but it was also the place where a lot of business dealings would occur and would take place. See, these gates would be built. On either side of the gate would be these massive, we would maybe think these are just massive pillars, but they're actually buildings. And in each side there would be a room where these types of business dealings could take place, where almost even like a court of law could take place. And so this is the gate. This is kind of the expected place for this type of thing. But there's another part of this, that's where Boaz went and he sat down. For Boaz to go and sit there, what he's doing is he's communicating to the people that might be passing in and out of the city that I have a business dealing to take care of. And so what this is going to communicate to, for one, it's going to communicate to the elders that he talks about, that if an elder passes by and they see Boaz sitting there, they know, I better not wander too far from here because I'm about to be brought into this meeting. I'm about to be brought into this thing. But it was also sort of a thing for spectators to come. There wasn't a whole lot of private meetings that happened during this time. Most things were part of the public eye. And so spectators, maybe people who are a little nosy, or people who just know Boaz, or people who just want to know what's going on, they would pass by and they would see Boaz sitting and they would see his location and they would know, okay, there's fixing to be something that happens here, something that goes down. I don't have anything else going on. I may as well stick around. But this was also a communication to the unnamed kinsman. We don't know a whole lot about this man. We know that he was nearer in relation to Elimelech than Boaz was, but really we don't know his name. We don't know his status in the community. We don't really know anything at all. But Boaz was confident that he at some point in the day would be passing by here, and it would be an opportunity for Boaz to say, come over here and sit down. We've got some business dealings to take care of. Now, I don't know that we have a lot of great modern day comparisons to this, but here's what I came up with. Here's what I thought of. About 6 years ago, give or take, I led a group of teenagers to a mission trip on the Navajo Indian Reservation in Arizona. And we had a leader there that was like, he was part of the community. And we had some downtime, and he asked me, would you like to go with me to the community center? They're having a council meeting. And I was like, yeah, let's go. I want to go view this. I want to go watch this. And it was just a room not much bigger than this. There was chairs set up like this. And then there was a council of the elders that were sitting there, elders of that particular community. And it was a really neat meeting to watch. I knew nothing of what they were saying because, these were people that were old enough. Their first line of communication was still in Navajo. And they were dealing with just different things in the community. They were talking about water supplies and things like just the different types of things that they would need to talk about. The other thing that I think that maybe we have a comparable process, maybe you have been called for jury duty. You can't just not show up. That's a federal crime. If you get called for jury duty, you have to come. And so like these elders that would have been passing by, they didn't really have the right or the opportunity to say, I got other things going on, I don't want to be there. And then this unnamed kinsman, it's like the process of somebody getting served. And I've never actually seen anybody get served papers, never been served papers myself, so my reference is only what I've seen on television, which is accurate 30% of the time maybe. So I really don't know, but I think you're probably watching the same shows I'm watching. So that's what you have seen also is usually when somebody serves papers, they try to take a picture of you as fast as they can to see like you have the papers. So it's like you have no recourse at this point. You have to go. You've been served. You're being sued. You have to show up. You don't have another option in this. And that's sort of the place that this unnamed kinsman was in. Because Boaz had sat down, because the elders had gathered, and because he saw him walk by and he said, come over here and sit down, he didn't have a choice in the matter. he had to sit down. He had to be a part of this. And Boaz offered two different things to this unnamed kinsman. The first offering was Elimelech's land, the property that he had. Now, Leviticus chapter 25, it outlines what we call like the Redeemer's rights to the land, even if it had been sold out of the family. Now, what would have happened, what we believe happened is Ruth and Elimelech, they left Bethlehem because they were broke. They left because they felt they did not have another choice. So they would have sold that land before they left and then fled to Moab to be a part of that. Now, in this culture, in this time, after Elimelech died, if some relatives came back, the person who bought it did not have a choice in the matter. They had to sell it back to a kinsman if they wanted to buy it. Now, there was no requirement for the kinsman to necessarily have to purchase the land, but if a kinsman came and said, I want to buy the land to keep it in the family name, that person, they had to sell it back. And it was, you can call that whatever you want. You can call that a distribution of the wealth or whatever you want. I don't care. This is what they did. It's how the process happened. Numbers 27 outlines the process of how you become that redeemer, how you get to have the right to purchase that land. And so first it would go to the son of the person. If there was no son, then it would go to the daughter. If there was no daughter, it would go to the person's brothers. If the person had no brothers, it would go to the person's uncle. And then after that point, it would go just to whoever the nearest kinsman is. So like I said, we don't know a lot about this particular kinsman, but we do know that he is the nearest person that was related to Elimelech that is still alive. And so the line had gone down through all these different processes, and it had landed on this man. And then Boaz obviously was after him. But the second offering that Boaz offered here to this unnamed kinsman is Ruth's hand in marriage. Deuteronomy chapter 25 outlines levirate marriage, and we talked a little bit about that in week 1, but essentially the widow, when somebody passed away and they left a widow that did not have children, that widow's brother-in-law, they would have an obligation to become the husband to this woman. Now, in this particular case, Boaz nor the unnamed kinsman, neither one of them had a legal obligation to marry Ruth. They were not brothers to Ruth's late husband, Mahlon. They also were not brothers to Naomi's late husband, Elimelech. So there's no legal obligation for them, but there is sort of a sense of morality on their part where they say, I have an opportunity to step in here and take care of this woman. I'm not legally obligated to it, but I can do that. And so as the process takes place, it is determined that this man, this unnamed kinsman, he will not be taking his role as the kinsman redeemer. He will not be taking advantage of his kinsman's rights on the land or on Naomi. So he passes them on down to the next person in line, which is Boaz. And it moves on, it says this, Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, Buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon. I have bought her to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. Well, once again, we have a couple of just cultural things happening that are a little bit different, but they're at play here. And the first is this sandal exchange thing. What's that about? Who decided on this as the form of legal dealings? I will take my sandal off. What do you do with it? It didn't really outline it that much. Just going to take my sandal off. So this is a strange thing, and it kind of got me to thinking this week, like, in this day, that was legal. Like, this was the legal means of saying, I now own this property. And so it just got me thinking, like, now the way we do it is we sign a bunch of papers. And so we're saying that your signature on a piece of paper has the same value as giving your sandal to somebody. And aren't, like, all these legal forms of business, aren't they all just kind of arbitrary? Isn't it strange how just from one culture to the next, you just have these things that somebody decides this is the way we do it? What's our future going to be like? Are we going back to the sandal thing when we forget how to write because we type everything or we text everything? I don't know. There's a lot to consider there that has nothing to do with this sermon, so let's move on, why don't we? But this is the first instance where we see definitively which of Naomi's sons Ruth was married to. We know that they had two sons, Mahlon, Chilion, and there were two widows, Ruth and Orpah. It doesn't actually mention until here in chapter 4 which one Ruth was married to. And so we know now she was married to Mahlon. And all the people who were at the gates and the elders, like these people, again, this is where they gathered. This is where they came to see what was happening. They came to be a part of the business. They came to be a part of the business dealings that were going on. And the response indicated that they are witnesses. They said, we will be witnesses. But the response indicated like they're actually really happy about this. And I think, again, this probably speaks a lot to the character of Ruth. Because, again, Ruth was a Moabite woman living in Bethlehem. On its just own merit, it would have been difficult for these people to accept Ruth into their community. But now we don't just see that she's accepted, we see that they are so excited about what is going on here. They were happy for Boaz, and they expected that from this marriage there would be some fruit. And they gave this verbal blessing to Boaz. This, I think, might be much like whenever we go to weddings now for a young couple, we might write in a card and say something like, we're praying for your marriage. We're praying blessing over this union, or however you might want to say that. This is the type of thing that's happening. These people, they're excited for Boaz. They're excited that Ruth is officially becoming a part of the family. And they're saying, we think incredible things are going to come from this marriage. And they referred back to some historical figures, Rachel and Leah. These were the wives of Jacob who became the matriarchs of the entire Israelite nation. These people know, like, we exist because Rachel and Leah. Then he talks about Perez, who was an ancestor of Boaz's clan in Bethlehem. Now, the comparison between Ruth and Tamar is not about their character. It's not about their moral compass, because Tamar tricked her father-in-law into having a child with her. The comparison is not to say this is the type of person Ruth is. The comparison is that in a Levirate marriage, a son can be born, and that son can have significant impact. That son can have a significant outcome on the history of the world and in the story of God. And so this celebration and this blessing, in essence, they were saying, we believe that God is doing through your marriage what he wants to do. We believe that he's going to change the world. We believe that he's going to have an incredible impact on what Yahweh is doing in this world. We believe that this marriage matters, that this is going to be important. Now, I'm going to step out here and say, I think that every marriage has this type of value to it. I think when two people decide to marry one another, it's going to change the world. Now, hopefully it changes the world for the better, for the good. Hopefully we look at our marriages, and I'm speaking to engaged people, I'm speaking to single people, I'm speaking to married people right now. Hopefully, when you get to the point of being married to someone, you look at that and say, the point of this marriage is to honor God, to be on mission for him, to change the world because of it. But that's a choice that we all have to make. Because marriage does change the world, but we get to choose whether it changes it for good or for bad. The chapter finishes like this. So Boaz took Ruth and became his wife, and he slept with her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you to this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Aminadab. Aminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. So Ruth and Boaz, they do get married. And out of this marriage becomes a son named Obed. And the naming process, evidently, it involved all the women. Now, I don't know probably any woman today who would say, "Let me gather all my girls around and you guys help me name this child." I know people who they don't tell anybody what they're going to name their child because they don't want anybody's opinion on it. Just get it on the birth certificate, it's legal, then you can give your opinion, and we're not changing it. But evidently there was, in some form or fashion, the women were involved with this process. I think most likely the name was mostly chosen by Ruth and Boaz, but it was affirmed and blessed by the women. And the name Obed means servant of God or agent of God. So as this child, this newborn child, what capacity are they expecting Obed to be a servant in? Like, what are their thoughts and dreams for this child that they say he's going to be an agent of Yahweh? He's going to be a servant of Yahweh. Well, eventually, we know that Obed becomes the grandfather of David. And eventually, his name winds up in the genealogy records of King Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. So that's a pretty fitting name. They've got some high expectations, and he meets them. But I think immediately, however, Naomi's redemption seems to be at play here. Naomi, she no longer has to wonder if she'll be cared for. She no longer has to worry if her family's name is going to continue, if there's going to continue to be people from her lineage, her line, that walk this earth. Naomi no longer has to worry about the things that she was before worried about. So yes, the Obed, servant of God, agent of God, that's got long-term implications, but it also has short-term implications. The theme of Ruth chapter 4 is redemption. It's really the theme of the whole book, but especially chapter 4, we see where this actually starts to take place. The immediate plot line is the redemption of Naomi and Ruth through this process of kinsman redeemership. The foreshadow and the long-term plot line is redemption of all people from the line of Ruth, from the line of Obed and Boaz, that will affect everyone through the work of Jesus Christ. And so what I want to do, and I just kind of looked at this story this week, and there's 5 things about redemption that are present in the story of Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi. They're also present in the lives of everybody, the lives of Christ followers, the lives of non-Christ followers. And the first one is this, that redemption is necessary. Redemption is necessary. Well, what is redemption? It is God's gracious act of rescuing people from bondage. Now, Naomi and Ruth, they were in bondage to this reality of life. It was a difficult time to be widows in the world. And that is their reality, and that's what they're in bondage to. There were not a lot of options for widows in this time frame, and so that's what they're in bondage to. Well, people today, people all times, are in bondage to sin and hell. And they will, if they continue in that life, they will die, and they will not be with Jesus forever. It's not just a temporary separation from God, it's an eternal separation from God. People are in bondage to different things. And I love that Boaz, he acted with urgency. Like as soon as Ruth came to him and said, hey, I want you to be the kinsman redeemer, he said, I'm going to get this settled tomorrow. And the very next chapter, it turns over and it says, now Boaz went to the gate. He went there right then. He acted with a sense of urgency. He knew that this was important. He knew that he couldn't linger on this. He knew that he couldn't wait around to just see what happens. He knew that it was urgent. Well, there is an urgency in redemption for all of mankind. There was an urgency for redemption, and that's why Jesus came into the world. There's an urgency for redemption. So here's how this plays out. There's an urgency of redemption for you and for me. There's an urgency of redemption for everybody. And so if we aren't following Christ, there's an urgency to do so, but there is also an urgency for us to take part in the redemption story of others. We don't have the time to wait around and say, somebody else will tell them about Jesus. Somebody else will minister to them. Who else? If it's not Christ followers, if it's not the bride of Christ, who else is going to do it? We have to quit pushing it off to somebody else. It's our job. Redemption is urgency. We need to be redeemed, and people in our lives need to be redeemed. Second, redemption is only through Jesus. You know, in this story of Ruth, the nearer kinsman, he was not able to fulfill the role of redeemer. And I think that we can put him in the part of antagonist if we want, or we can just recognize that this is just the way it was. I don't really know. But we know that it was his opportunity, and he passed on it because he wasn't able to do it. Listen to me, church. Redemption comes from nobody but Jesus. It is only through the blood of Jesus. It is only through the cross of Jesus, and ultimately it's only through his resurrection that we can be redeemed. And since week 1, when I was looking over this, there's really two things that have been rattling around in my brain here. Is that this kinsman redeemer, this unnamed kinsman, he was good to go to fulfill this role when he got the benefit of the land. Like, do you hear how fast he jumped on that? Yeah, Elimelech's land, yeah, I'll take that. But then as soon as this responsibility of caring for Ruth came into play, he's like, I'm out. I don't want that part. This is a perfect example of the way that Satan rolls in our lives. Satan wants for people to be his agents, to work for him, to do things that are detrimental to the kingdom of God, but he does not care for our souls. He does not care for our well-being. Satan is a selfish being. And the second thing that's just been rattling in my brain with this is that Boaz took the place of another. He took the place of another to restore Ruth and Naomi. Jesus took the place of another in death to bring us to right relationship with our Father. Do you know that Jesus did not deserve the death that he went through? You deserve that, and I deserve that. But Jesus took the place of another so that we could have a right relationship with our Father. There is no substitute. There's not another way to find redemption. There's not another avenue that we can come into right relationship with God. There is no substitute. It's only Jesus. Our good works cannot redeem us. Our rule following cannot redeem us. Our church attendance cannot redeem us. Our financial generosity cannot redeem us. Somebody else's faith, mom, dad, husband, wife, friend, their faith cannot redeem us. Only Jesus can redeem us. It's the only card we have to play. And so, church, if you're seeking redemption in any other form than just the blood of Jesus and trusting Him and following Him with your life, you're chasing the wrong things. Third, redemption is transformative. I love seeing the difference in Ruth or in Naomi from chapter 1 and Naomi in chapter 4. Naomi in chapter 1 is speaking a curse over herself. She's saying, I came back empty. Don't even call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because I am cursed. Naomi in chapter 4 is listening to the townspeople speak a blessing over her. Because redemption is transformative. It transforms all of us. 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old has passed away, the new has come. Redemption should change us. If we've truly been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, we should look different than the world, and we should look different than the way that we used to look. If we don't, we probably haven't really been redeemed. And you might think, well, that's a little bit harsh. Is it? Like, can we really have an impact so significant with the Father that our lives don't begin to change? Not that we don't still mess up, but that we're trying to become more like the Lord every single day. We're trying to look more like Him every day. Redemption is transformative. Fourth, redemption has eternal implications. Eternal implications. Ruth and Naomi's redemption led to the birth of Obed. The birth of Obed led to the birth of Jesse. The birth of Jesse led to the birth of David. And eventually, this led to the birth of Jesus, who saves mankind for all of eternity through His death, burial, and resurrection. And our redemption also has the potential to change the world, even if it's just in our family line. I've shared the story of my grandmother before, that she was born into just a capital D dysfunctional family. She should have just stayed with the family tradition and been lost. But the Lord redeemed her. Bree's grandfather has the same story. Bree's grandfather's dad was a raging alcoholic who was abusive. But Bree's grandfather went to a revival one night, and he came into a relationship with Jesus. He was redeemed by the blood of Jesus. He wound up pastoring that church that he was redeemed in for 35 years. He changed his family lineage. Like, if my grandmother had not been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, I don't know where I would be at. If Bree's grandfather had not been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, I don't know where she would be at. I don't know where Horizon Church would be at. And so maybe that's the change. Maybe that's the only change you think you're making is in your family line. Your family line matters. The trajectory of your family's future matters so much. Redemption has eternal implications. And then finally, redemption has always been the plan. In Genesis chapter 1 and 2, we see this picture of what God created with ideal existence. Like, man, this is perfect. This is how I want it to be. This is how I want relationship with my people. This is how I want them to experience life. This is how I want them to experience me. And then chapter 3, you see the brokenness come into play. In Romans chapter 5, you see that this brokenness, it all came into the world because of the sin of one man. The sin of one man, he brought with him this brokenness, this what we see right now, this what we've been experiencing this last week, this what you've been experiencing for your entire life. You know that every negative thing that you have ever gone through, that's not how it was created to be. Sin messed that up. And Romans 8 tells us that all of creation has been affected by that. Romans 9, 10, and 11 tell us that God has been working throughout history, throughout people, to correct what sin destroyed. So this idea of redemption, that has been the plan since the beginning, since sin entered the world. The Gospels in the book of Revelation show us how Jesus set men free, how he redeems mankind, and ultimately it culminates in the restoration of all things. Redemption has been the plan since sin entered the world, and we get to take part in that through experiencing redemption ourselves, but also by having a ministry of redemption. The narrative of Ruth is extraordinary. I have loved reading it over and over and over again these last 4 weeks. It's an incredible story. But the truth is the book of Ruth, the story of Ruth, it's just a small chapter in the great story of God's redemption. It's just a small piece in what God has been doing to correct what sin broke. And so I ask you the question this morning, have you been redeemed? Has redemption found you? Have you found redemption? You are a sinner, and sin does separate you from God, and it distorts your created purpose. But Jesus wants to redeem you. He wants to bring you back to himself. And so I just ask you that this morning. Have you been redeemed? Have you ever followed Jesus? Have you ever made a commitment in your life that I'm going to live for him? I'm not going to live for myself. I'm not going to live for anything outside of me. I'm going to live for him. That's what I was created for, and that's what I'm getting back to. So have you been redeemed? And the second question I want to ask you is, has redemption been transformative in your life? If you claim, if you say, I have been redeemed, well, how does it look different than what it used to look like? How does it look different than what the world looks like? Now, I want to talk to myself for a minute. Sometimes I like to do that. You guys, feel free to listen in on it. But these things are really for me. I think you guys probably have your life together. These things are for me. I was not redeemed to live isolated from a church community. I was not redeemed to continue in my sin. I was not redeemed to only seek the Lord one day a week. I was not redeemed to stand idly by while the enemy has his way with my family. I was not redeemed to stand idly by while my neighbors, coworkers, classmates, whoever, never hear the gospel. I was not redeemed to ignore the broken and the hurting. I was not redeemed to treat people poorly. I was not redeemed to live in constant fear and anxiety. I was not redeemed to blend into the crowd. I was not redeemed to be a fan of Jesus, liking what he can do, but never truly following him. I was redeemed for a purpose. I was redeemed to lead people into their own redemption story. And if there's not visible evidence of that redemption working in my life, transforming my life, that's one of those check yourself before you wreck yourself moments where you might need to have a difficult conversation with yourself. And say, am I really redeemed? Am I doing this right? Third, I want to ask you, has your redemption story had an impact on eternity? See, I think that we get to choose that. I don't think we can choose that redemption transforms us. I think truly redeemed people are transformed by the gospel. But I do think that we get to choose how our redemption story changes eternity. And so ask yourself, does it matter to the people who are closest to me that I've been redeemed? Like, is that making an impact on their lives? Is that having an effect on their lives? Am I leading my children in this way? Am I leading my neighbors in this way? Do the people around me, has their life been impacted because I have been redeemed? So I'll just ask you one last time. The band's going to come forward. And I just ask you one last time to consider this as we step into a time of worship. Have you been redeemed? Truly redeemed? Let's pray together.